We had to give a name to the session, so of course I asked my AI co-pilot to come up with a name. So it's Construction Data Chaos to Clarity is the name of the session. Jordan did a good job of introducing the company and what we do. So I'm Fraser, I don't know, data architect maybe is the best way to kind of describe me. They don't let me play with the tools much these days and actually get stuff done. I get to go and play with the cool stuff a lot of the time. But we started doing this, I don't know if Jordan mentioned in the Kahoot there, but we started about 25 years ago, just under 25 years ago, as a software development firm. We were building solutions for the construction industry. We had a tool that you could fax RFIs into a phone number, and then we would OCR those RFIs and put them into a web portal. Luckily, we got to turn that off after a few years, and we transitioned to more modern things. About 10 years ago, we had some customers that were actually eCMS customers, and they said to us, "Have you heard of this tool called Tableau?" And I said, "No, we've never seen that before." And then went off and played with Tableau a little bit and started visualizing the data that we had been storing in databases. And so now this is kind of 75% of what we do is analytics, visualizations. We still do software development. We still do integrations with other systems, those kind of other things. But the main thing these days is the data engineering and the analytics side of the business. So today, first thing was the Kahoot game. We've got that done. I'm going to talk a little bit about building a modern data environment. Some of you have heard me kind of talk about this a little bit in the past. I'm going to actually show you some cool modern tools that you may not have seen before. Then we're going to move into building KPI dashboards. I'm going to talk about a customer use case that is a project that we've been working on for many years, but it's been a really successful deployment of KPI dashboards that are kind of used throughout the organization, multiple organizations now. So I'm going to kind of walk through that process a little bit, how we did that. So starting off, let's think for a moment about the current state of construction data. Some of the challenges, how fast can you show what's the profit on the jobs? Is that a manual process? Does that require you to go and generate manual reports and consolidate them together across multiple companies? One of the issues is latency. If you're working with systems, how long does it take before data migrates from one place to another? Inconsistency. If you're using Procore to do your change orders, is that number the same number that's in your ERP, or is it a different number? Or are the change orders not even making it into your ERP? Manual entry and re-entry. We have one customer that it's 3 steps of manual entry to produce their T&M invoices. Do it once in Excel, copy and paste it into another place, copy and paste it into another place. That's how they build their invoices every month. Not everybody is just running one system, right? You have eCMS, but are you running your payroll in eCMS, or do you have an external system to run payroll? Where's estimating done? That's probably another tool. What kind of field apps have you guys implemented? Have your PMs just started using on the field without telling anybody, that are collecting data that's important to your organization? How many spreadsheets do you have? How many Excels are out there that they're all storing data that you need to keep and have a handle on? So what does when I say modern architecture, what does that actually mean? First thing is thinking, cloud first, right? Is it a cloud infrastructure? We saw from the keynote yesterday morning, and kind of the recurring theme is security, the redundancy. That stuff just comes from the cloud for free, right? You don't have to pay dollars to go and implement that redundancy. You don't have to pay a guy to do that security the same way if you're running on the cloud infrastructure. It's building out that centralized warehouse. So you're taking all your data from all those various systems that you have, bringing it into one place, potentially setting up automated pipelines using middleware to have data flow from one system to another. And then the last point on there This is the thing that we've been talking about more and more over the last year, is this idea of the semantic layer. So if you want to have an AI take your data and work with your data, you have to have it in a state where the AI can look at that data and start to infer things about it. If you're giving just raw tables out of eCMS, it's going to see those column names and it's not going to know what's in that column. You do have to do some cleanup. You want to remove those things like your test companies and your companies that are no longer in use and kind of build that up so that you've got the consistency, but also you have data that's in a state that's ready for AI and to be able to make use of it. So thinking about that, what's the role of eCMS in that architecture, right? What's your source of truth? What system are people logging into every day and working with every day? eCMS is a big database. There's lots of places in there to store data. There's probably a lot of places that you could store data in eCMS that you're not using today, right? And when you set up some of these integrations and stuff, you can start getting more value for that database that you already have, potentially. So this is kind of the diagram that we have been generating quite a lot these days. When we're talking to people, we kind of want to do an assessment and say, what are those source systems that you have along the bottom there? And what data is in those source systems, right? So we start to try to identify and map that out a little bit and see, where things are sitting. It's not uncommon to have duplicate data in all of these systems, right? If you're running external payroll, you have employees there. You have employees also sitting in eCMS. You also have employees sitting in your project management system, right? How are you coordinating that data? If somebody gets married and they change their last name, is it that you have to go to those 3 systems and update them all manually, or do you have something like a middleware in place where you just update it in eCMS as your source of truth, and then it gets pushed out to those other 2 systems, just behind the scenes on schedule? Looking at that middleware section there, talking about what are your requirements? So back to how long does it take to generate the data? Some things, if it refreshes once a day, that's great, right? That'll meet your requirements. Other things, if you're talking about labor and you want to be able to get a handle on what's happening with labor, maybe it's every hour. Maybe it's even more often than that you want to have your data refreshed. And we have to look at things like streaming solutions so that you can get that data in near real time. The other thing is, when we're setting up the data warehouse and the middle layer there, this idea of data marts. So creating data sets that you can hand over to a controller. You can hand it over to a VP that knows how to use the analytics tools. They can even connect to those with Excel, right? And they're getting data from the place that you've cleaned up and you've turned into a trusted data source. Everybody's using that same trusted data source instead of 5 different reports pulling from 5 different places. The other component on there is the data governance. So, what are you doing to make sure that that data that you have in your data warehouse is accurate and correct? Is it refreshing on time? We've built executive dashboards that go to 5 production systems and try to consolidate that data together. How do you handle if 4 of those systems are refreshing just fine, but one of them failed overnight? You got to have some kind of tools to be able to monitor that and be able to tell that to the people that are looking at your dashboards. And then at the top, just data consumption. So, we have tools, business intelligence tools like Tableau, Power BI. There's new tools that are coming out. I'm going to show you one of them in a few minutes here. So that's generating your dashboards. There's also other tools for generating reports, potentially, multi-page, those 100-page reports. And then the last piece was just, external systems and APIs. So every time you need to do an integration, are you paying a consultant to go out and rediscover your data and pipe it from the source system into the new system, or are you using that data warehouse that you've already built with tried and trusted data and connecting that to your API when you're connecting to the new systems? So just thinking about all those different pieces, there's a lot to it. And, like we said, we've got a lot of experience with a lot of different systems from over the years. whether it's like payroll or CRMs. So, we've kind of done this a few times before, and usually a little bit faster to, get stuff up and stood up and running, just because of that past experience. I just wanted to point this out to kind of go a little bit deeper. I'm trying to not be too technical this year. I feel like last year when we were in Nashville, I was a little bit too technical, talking about AIs and stuff. But I just want to kind of point out here, when we're structuring the data in the data warehouse, this is kind of where I'm going, is that you have that employee table that came from the source system, and then we're going to do some work to kind of clean that up. So that's where we remove like test companies, we take out the fields that don't have any data in them, rename them to make sense. Take that time card data, same thing happens there, and then we combine those together to get that time card master. So you're taking data from multiple sources, making sure that it's complete and available, and that's where we can go and create that data mart, and that's what's going to be powering all your reports and all your dashboards and things like that. So a lot of this we've done because we've done it before, because we have that experience with eCMS. A lot of those cleaned and master views we've already got done for the eCMS data. So it's sometimes there's a bit of data discovery involved, because we have to figure out how you're using eCMS and how you've got it set up, but a lot faster time to get that deployed and in place, just because of that. So getting into what modern actually means, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these, because you can go and check them out on your own. But Gartner always puts out these magic quadrants where they kind of say like who the leaders are. So the top right corner is where everybody wants to be in that leader category. So tools like for integration platform, that's like your middleware. Microsoft, Boomi, those are the two that kind of stand out that we see kind of coming up again and again. Data analytics and governance. I put Microsoft there as a challenger, just because we have experience with it. I know there's somebody else in the room that has Oval Edge, and so that's down in the niche player quadrant. The one that is kind of, you can see they're a leader in both of those is Informatica, which just got bought by Salesforce. So that's a kind of a tool to kind of watch, I guess. And then the last one is the analytics one, and that's where we have Microsoft Power BI and Tableau both being kind of the leaders. The other one that I want to point out on here is Sigma. So we're seeing a lot of people that are actually trying out Sigma now, and they're moving away from Tableau or Power BI and playing with Sigma. We've done a little bit of playing with Sigma as well. But what's happening with analytics and business intelligence just in the past couple of years is things are starting to change. And there's the new companies that are doing interesting things and powerful things with BI that are different than the leaders that we've seen traditionally. So taking that a little bit further, I'm going to show you a tool called Golden Analytics. This is it's actually created, the founder of the company is a former product guy from Tableau. And he got some investment money, and he started building this Golden product. It's not something that you can actually go and buy yet. It's still like waitlist, early days. But the idea with this tool is that it's got AI built in right from the start, right? So it's not that they've had to go and bolt on the AI. Like from the start of development, they've been working on this. So I'm going to switch over. I guess it's over here. This one. Okay. So this is, I'm already logged in here, and I'm going to say I want to create an analysis. And I'm not going to connect to a database. I actually just have a CSV file. So this is, the eCMS job cost master, right? You guys have kind of seen this before. It's a known data set, so I'm going to double click on that. It's going to upload it here. And then just in a few seconds, you can see it's starting to spin a little bit. So it's actually looked at that file that I upload. It looked at the title. It says job cost master with the latest forecast. And it's actually gone through all that data, and it started to come up with insights. So the first thing it says here, this data is project job cost master tracking budgets, actuals, and forecasts across 2 specific jobs. It is designed for variance analysis between original budgets and estimated cost at completion. So it just looked at the data, and it came up with that. I think that's pretty cool. Next thing here, key questions to explore. So this tool has kind of gone out and it looked at the data and said, okay, do you want to see project budget versus actuals? It's done some insights and it's saying, okay, well, the majority of the data is with a single customer, and it's pointing out what that customer is. So it's come up with a bunch of insights here. It's even giving me some suggested visualizations if I want to build a dashboard. I'm not going to go there quite yet. I'm actually going to switch over to this tab, where actually this tab here, where I can go and look at my data. And so I've identified a few things here with my data right off the start. Cost type is not a dollar amount. Cost type is a cost type. So I'm going to actually switch over here. I'm just going to copy and paste so I don't have to do as much typing. So I'm going to say cost. So I'm just going to paste this in. I'm just going to tell the AI, cost type is actually a calculated field. 1 is labor, 2 is equipment, 3 is materials, 4 is subcontract. So I'm going to tell it that. It's just going to take a few seconds here. It's going to think about that. And it's going to come up and say, okay, I created a cost type label for you that maps all those fields. It also identified that I have cost type 9, that it wasn't in my list that I provided, so it just stuck that into other. So I didn't have to know how to make a calculated field. I didn't know how to write a code to be able to do that. It did it for me. So 2 other things about my data here. I always want to see the description with the cost code, so show them to me combined. I can do that same thing. Again, a few seconds there. I created a calculated field for you that combines the 2 together. And, the most important one I skipped over. Because the eCMS export is just original budget and then change orders as 2 separate columns, I'm going to say I need current budget. So it's just the original budget plus the change orders. So, creating these calculated fields is not something that I have to know how to code or, I'm just chatting with the AI. This is what I'm looking for. So now that I've done that little piece of my analysis here, I want to start creating a dashboard. And so I go over to the dashboard screen here, and again, it's come up with some suggestions for my data. Do you want a labor and subcontractor cost deep dive? Do you want budget estimating and forecasting anomalies? It's looked at that data, and it's starting to come up with suggestions here. I can take those suggestions, or I can describe the dashboard that I want to create. So I'm going to actually take that option. So I just typed up a paragraph here. I'm a project manager. I work for this company. I'm interested in this kind of stuff. So generate me a dashboard. So there you go. How quick was that? And it created me a dashboard just based on what I said, right? So I'm not going and typing in Copilot and waiting for 5 minutes for it to do stuff, right? That's pretty fast there. It's created project cost variance analysis. It's got a finding in there. I got something similar to this before. It's the quote from management. Focusing on cost codes with 0 budget but high actuals is critical for maintaining profitability, right? So it's made this neat little dashboard for me here. I didn't really have to do anything. I'm gonna kind of, I want to be a little bit different here now. So there's 2 jobs actually in my data set, not just 1 job. So I'm gonna again start just chatting with the AI here. Put in a job description filter for me so I can pick the job that I want. And so it's created that filter for me now. I didn't have to do anything. It put it in the dashboard so I can pick which job I want to see and be able to filter that now. Let's see, I can say, I see an error on here. It's probably really small for you guys to see, but the biggest bar on there is job income. So it's cost type 9, so that's it didn't quite get it right there. So I'm just going to say cost type 9 is job income and should be excluded. So again, it's going to think for a few seconds here, and it hasn't been getting this right for me. It puts the filter in, but it doesn't exclude 9. So I have to just click the 4 that I'm interested in, and then it will look a little bit better there now. I can do other stuff here. I can say, I'm also interested in the ECAC. I want to know if any of the cost codes are sitting and they're greater than their ECAC. So I'll just tell it that, and it'll say, okay, sure. Give it a second, and there it goes. So those are the cost codes where their spend is over the estimated cost at completion. So, I didn't really have to do a lot of work there. I'm just chatting with the AI, and it's building the dashboard for me. So I'm not even clicking my mouse, right? I'm just chatting. And actually, it's come up here, and it said, oh, would you also like to see overrun details as a table? Sure. Go and create me that table as well. So it did that. Now, I've got my dashboard here, and it created these KPI cards there, and I don't really like that. So I'll say, move the KPI cards to the top. And you can see there, it's just going to click and do that. And then it moved everything else down to make room for those KPI cards. Like, that took 10 seconds. I would have sat there for a couple minutes clicking the mouse and moving stuff around and getting frustrated with it. But that's where the tools have kind of come, even in the past year. Like a lot of the other tools that are out there, you can't do this, right? Like this is pretty cool. I was pretty excited when I could start doing this kind of stuff. And like I said, I got access to, I saw demos, like I've seen a few demos kind of over the past few months of this, but I got access to the tool on Friday. I sat with their guys for about an hour. They gave me another demo. I played with this for a few hours. I had to practice, a few times to get my flow, but this isn't like weeks of training. It was pretty fast for me to start playing around with this and start doing stuff. So that's what I mean by, there's some really modern tools that are starting to emerge, that's where you're making people more efficient. By, you're not necessarily, eliminating the analyst, but you're making the analyst's life a lot easier because they're not sitting there clicking their mouse nonstop. If somebody is like in that controller or the VP role, they don't have to learn like a new syntax to be able to write the calculations that they're looking for. Just ask the AI to kind of do that for you. So that's kind of the quick demo of that. But like I said, it's pretty exciting to be able to play with that tool, and new things are happening. Things are not slowing down in this field for sure. So before I kind of go on to my use case and my example here of the KPI dashboards, just want to mention some of these common pitfalls. You don't have to create a data warehouse today that has every one of your eCMS tables and every one of your systems. You don't need to go off for a year and build that data warehouse. Start small and scale, right? Like set it up at the beginning, answer some business questions. Where is it going to give value today? Start building that out and build it up over time. Second one there, lack of alignment. When you're talking about how you define your KPIs, is everybody on board? Is the executive team on board? Keynote, he talked about that this morning as well, like making sure that they're sponsoring and involved in these projects and on board. The last one here, just building dashboards without foundations. We started a couple months ago working with a new customer, and they had hired like an analyst to build some dashboards for them. They built a bunch of Power BI dashboards, and then they left the company, right? And so this was kind of started like they weren't refreshing automatically. There was some good stuff in there, but it was kind of, they weren't putting a lot of thought. They were just building those dashboards. And so we've kind of been working on a project to put the data warehouse in place and put all those foundations so that we can refresh them and set that up properly. We were catching things like the ones that were there were not properly tested. Obviously, some of the numbers and the calculations were just wrong, like the accounts receivable on jobs. So making sure that everybody's aligned on how you're calculating, where you're pulling that data from is really important. So this next piece is building KPI dashboards that leaders actually use. And I presented a longer version of this previously, and there's recordings online if you want to get the full presentation. I don't have time for it obviously today, but I wanted to kind of give some of the highlights from this talk. So has anyone seen this spreadsheet before? Financial people in the room, yeah? Okay. So this is how all the CFOs and accountants want to see their data, right? Like they have their profit and loss, Accounts are the rows, months are the columns. It's in Excel, they're really happy. When data people see the spreadsheet, we don't like it. We have to unpivot the data, we have to manipulate it a little bit to kind of make it work for dashboards. But that's what everybody's kind of used to today. So second piece here, most ERPs have a budget module. eCMS has a budget module. Who uses the budget module in eCMS? Who's got their budget in Excel? Yeah, exactly, right? So that's, there's places where you can like store the data where it's structured and it's reliable. Excel is not structured and reliable, right? So we had this customer that came to us in 2022. Originally, they're a private equity firm. They have a bunch of companies in their portfolio. And what they wanted was that single KPI dashboard for all their portfolio companies. So they wanted to be able to look at the companies the same way, same data, same dashboard. One of the really good things about this project was that because they're private equity and owning companies is their business, they already had a very good idea of the KPIs that they were looking for. Sometimes there's a bit of discovery that's required to figure out what the KPIs that matter are and find alignment on those. But we had some good idea of what the KPIs were that they needed. Of course, the challenging was like everybody was doing this their own way. Nobody was being consistent in the way they reported. So they wanted that unified, trusted view. And of course, we get this comment more often than not. We have the feedback coming from CFOs or anybody in the C-suite, really. I don't want to have to click on anything. So, data analysts, we love to put filters and controls and drill downs and hovers and all this kind of stuff. Users don't want that. They want to be able to go and click on the link, open their dashboard, and see their data, right? Like they don't want to have to go and do a bunch of clicks and things like that to be able to find their data. We just did one other KPI dashboard over the past few months where same idea, it was for multiple companies. They had the same views for each of the companies. So we said, well, we can put a drop down in there and you can just click on the drop down and filter between, oh, we don't want that. Just make us 4 tabs. We'll go through each tab for each company. Just getting good alignment with the users and how they want to use these tools is really important. So we started building out this dashboard, established the KPIs, put it all together. We started getting things together, got the first version out there, and then we had a couple challenges. So one of them was a missed requirement. So one of the board guys, he doesn't have a computer. He just has an iPad. I would love to kind of be at the state in my career where I don't have to have a laptop anymore. But the challenge was in the dashboard was that the iPad is a different screen size, and so he couldn't see the dashboards properly. So we had to go back and do some refactoring and reworking to make sure that he could see the dashboards on the device that he's using. So the big thing is just kind of keeping in mind how your users are going to consume the data and making sure that it's formatted properly so that they're able to do that. The other piece is drill down is non-negotiable. I said, 3 slides ago, I don't want to have to click on anything. Yeah, C-suite doesn't want to have to click on anything, but when they have questions about those numbers and they're coming to you as the controller, you need to be able to click on something and be able to see what's the data behind that KPI and what makes up that. So lots of times, even though it may not be a requirement for the end user, for the people in between, we need to have that drill down and make sure that there's a drill down in there so that you can see that. So we got this out, version 1 was out, and they started using this, and we got a phone call from them, and they said, the dashboard's slow. We said, what? The dashboard's not slow, and we brought it up on the computer, and it's just fine. We didn't see any issue with it. And they're like, no, we're sitting in our meetings, and we bring up the dashboard that loads up for one company, and then we switch and we talk about the next company. And so what was happening is when they switched to bring up the next company, it was taking about 20 to 30 seconds for it to reload the dashboard with the second company's data. So if you can think that they had 10 companies, over the course of their meeting that they were reviewing, that's 20 to 30 seconds times 10. So you've got almost 5 minutes where they're just sitting there watching the thing spin. So, now that we again, putting ourselves in their hat kind of thing, we had to go in and make some changes to the dashboard to make it fast. So we did go in and make it a little bit faster. There were a few different things that we did to improve things, but we were able to kind of get the performance where switch companies and it takes 2 to 3 seconds to refresh now. So that was kind of the second one. So the second version was out there. And like I said, this started back in 2022. Version 1, version 2 were over a couple years. They used it for over a year. They were using it every quarter. It had data. It was great. They were happy with it, and we got a call from them. And they said, okay, we have some issues with the dashboard. And I was like, okay, what's the issue? Do you want us to do some more data engineering? Would you like us to set up a data warehouse now for you? No, we don't want that. We've actually identified new KPIs that we want to see on the dashboard. So because they were using that consistently over a period of time, they actually moved away from some of the KPIs that they were originally using and identified some new ones. So what we did is kind of went back and changed out some of the KPIs. We also did some stuff on the back end with the data source to make it more efficient and run a little bit better. But that was kind of the last kind of revision of this. And so this is what the dashboard looks like right now. I'm actually going to switch over here and just show you what the live one looks like. And I know it'll be really small on the screen, but I'll zoom in a minute. Oh, of course I got signed out. So you see that only took a couple of seconds for it to load up the dashboard, and I'll make this full screen so we can see it a bit better. And I'm just going to change the date. This is actually built to be a little bit smart. So we're in July right now, and so it's actually defaulted it to be end of last quarter. So when I open this up for the first time, I don't actually have to pick the month that I'm interested in, but my test data set here only goes back to December, so I do have to change the month there. But you can see here, as I switch through companies, it's pretty quick here to go through and reload the data. I've got all the different companies in here, and you'll see that some of them don't have all the KPIs. We talked about this, and they said, no, we want to leave it blank because that shows where we have the holes. So when they go look at this company, they can see when they're doing their reviews, well, they're not providing us that data, or they're not collecting that data. So that's kind of the dashboard. They did a couple variations of this, depending on the company type, where some of the KPIs got swapped out for other KPIs. But this is, let me just kind of highlight some of the things here. So bookings here, this would be, sales. So this is kind of coming from the CRM because it's not actually in production yet. You haven't started construction. Revenue, this is showing the revenue numbers. Gross profit, EBITDA, CapEx, stuff that's going to come off your financial statements. Sales and marketing spend, this is more for some of these companies that have big sales and marketing departments. Net promoter score, employee net promoter score, so that data from those satisfaction surveys that are always going out, that's included. DSO and DPO. This is a really good one because it's going beyond what's in the balance sheet. It's going beyond what's in the income statement. It's a measure of how well your collections team and how your payables teams are working, right? So that's kind of taking that data kind of to the next level. And then a few others here, but it's kind of go through the process of what KPIs matter to you. What makes sense on the dashboard. There's a lot of stuff happening in here it's not just regurgitating numbers off the income statement. It's doing a little bit more. The other thing that you probably saw here is that a lot of this is all snapshotted data. So if I go back 3 months further, it's all based on snapshots, right? So none of that data is going to change if you go back and review it at a later date. The other thing that we added in here was you can see there is a little bit of filters on there. The other one that they like is the months to show. So they can actually, by default, see a quarterly view, 3 months, but I can also change that to a 1 month. So it's going to show all the numbers just for the last month that you've selected. So there is a little bit of interactivity in there. Let's go back to that one. So I'm just going to deep dive a little bit on the KPI card. So because this is something, again, that it's been refined a few different times. We went through a couple different iterations of how we built this out. So I just want to kind of show you, because this is kind of maybe recommended best practice idea. So we've got the name of the KPI along the top there. The value for the number of selected months, like I said, it's either typically a 1 month or a 3 month number. So we show that number there. And then we show relative to the goal. So I asked at the beginning, where's your budgets, right? Well, the purple line there, that's the goal, right? That's where they should be. And you can see, they're really trailing what they should be based on their goal. They also had in the dashboard, actually, let me bring it up one more time. No, I must have closed it. Okay, they can switch out between the goal, which is the purple line, and they can show the prior year numbers as well. So one of the other things is if they want to see how are we doing last year, that's just a toggle that they can light up. We said we can show prior year, we can show the goal at the same time. They actually said no, that was too much data, right? It was just getting a little bit too cluttered, so we just made it a little bit of a swap. And then the bar chart shows the values for the last 12 months. So you can kind of get a sense of, historically how it's been tracking. You get the trend line in there as well, that, it's slightly trending down. But you can see, a lot of information just in this one little card there. You're not running multiple reports to see different things. It's kind of all packed in there. So that's the quick look at the KPI dashboard. The idea is that if we bring this all together, having that modern data environment in place, bringing all your data into a data warehouse, that gives you that trusted source, that reliable data that you can base a lot of this kind of thing off of. Once you have that reliable data, you can build the dashboards that leaders trust. And the double benefit there is that you've got the foundation for AI as well. So when they start asking about those kind of questions, we've already done all this data engineering work. We're prepared to start feeding this into AI tools now. And then once you have the dashboards, of course, that's your business outcomes, better decisions faster. You're not necessarily waiting for a month to close before you're showing dashboards to people. You're getting that data into their hands right away. One of the great examples that I like to bring up is, we have a customer that all of their time, they were working up in the north, it was mining. Their time cards were not anything electronic, it was written on a piece of paper because they were up in the north where they didn't have cell coverage and 5G and that kind of stuff. So they wrote it on a piece of paper, then they would take that time card data into the site trailer, and somebody would hand enter that in the morning. And so we had set up a bunch of time card dashboards for them, but they were always trailing by 1 day because Monday would happen, they'd enter that on Tuesday morning, but our refresh had already happened overnight. So we had to learn about their process and okay, they've hand entered it by noon. They gave them the requirement they had to get those time cards entered by noon because we would kick off a refresh at noon. And at 1 p.m., the PMs could go and see how many hours were being logged against their jobs. So kind of working with the process, but now they didn't have to wait, to get that data. They were getting it much faster than they used to. Once you deliver data faster, the next question is, can I have it even faster, right? So that's, building the right foundation, getting that data environment in place that enables all of those kind of use cases.